fishing? What kind of, do y'all mainly fish from the bank, do you fish from a boat?
Fish. I do both.
You do both? Fish from boat?
Both of my dock.
Boat or your docks? Okay. Do y'all do a lot of crappie fishing?
I do
Quite a bit? Main thing, you're on the boat. I can't stress. I mean, I went out the other day for my birthday, and I was all the way up to Sail Creek. I put in Chester Frost. I went, checking out some different spots. The boat broke down, so I had to call to a boat. That's one thing I can say is worth the money behind. But that trip did cost me a thing. That I paid the yearly fee. I think it was $70, $75, whatever a year that you pay. Doesn't matter how far you are on the lake. You run out of gas, they'll bring you gas. But they'll come and tow you wherever you need to go, all the way to where you put it at. Also, especially with the colder weather too, is a good life preserver. I prefer the inflatable one myself because it gives me easy casting, everything else, and then there's the standard one. You should have one of those when you're on the water. Anything can happen.
Which one is best?
Which one is best? The main thing is it needs
I
to
don't
be.
swim at all.
The best ones are the ones that have something to hold your head up too. If you look at the ones that the Coast Guard wears and the Navy wears, theirs are real padded, and I mean, they're made for if you get knocked out, it's going to hold your head above water.
Okay, do the Bass Pro carry them?
They have some of the better ones over there that do have the neck support.
Okay.
Mustang.
Mustang, yeah.
Called a Mustang?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they cost more, but they you want to make sure that if you get knocked out, you want to make sure that life jacket brings you up on your back, press the position, and keep your head out of the water. So, I've been in some really rough water. I was in the Navy, so I've been in 38-foot waves up in the Arctic. So we lost one guy up there. He didn't have any kind of observer on. Didn't have any no wetsuit or anything, and we never found him. And he'll never be found because of the cold water up there. But that's the whole reason of wearing a life jacket is, when you get knocked out, if you don't have a life preserver on, there's no chance of you surviving.
No.
Even if somebody sees you go, and I've seen where people see them go in the water, like they went in the water right there. Well, there could be a current, there could be anything. So, but all I can do is just, you need to have a life preserver on. But anyways, I'm here to talk about basically fishing structure, dock shooting, fishing brush piles, props. 90% of crappie fishing is done on structure. It's just what crappie like. They like to be around anything that gives them security. If you look at the tank, notice the crappie are on that brush pile in the corner. It could be a stump, it could be a rock, it could be a drop off, a bluff. I fish all those. It's amazing how much they like the structure. So, as far as dock shooting, I like to get, I use my side scan. I can see up underneath there. I can see the fish dotted. You might see on a fish finder on the side scan, you're going to see shadows of the poles, in the water, and you'll see a mark, and then you see another mark here. is the shadow of the fish, and that shadow determines how far the fish is up underneath that dock. The further the shadow from the fish, the higher up that fish is, and the more back, or the closer that fish is to you because of the shadow. But those fish, when they're in there, they're right up on the poles. You don't typically see a whole lot of them unless it's, a cloudy day. They really like to be right up against the poles. Try to get as close to I try different angles. I move around the dock. I don't just pull up to a dock, hit it a few times, and move on. I'll try the front, I'll try the side, I'll try the back if I get to the back. I thoroughly work the dock before if I know there's fish over there. So, but the best way, as far as dock shooting goes, does anybody else in here dock shoot docks? You ever done it? What I mean by shooting the dock, you need a good medium action rod with a fast tip. And what we do on dock shoot is we're taking, you're holding the rod, and we're going to shoot the thing like shooting an arrow. When you grab the jig, make sure you grab it by the head of the jig with the hook away from your fingers. Make sure they're clear. What you do is you're going to pull this thing back, and then you're going to shoot. And it shoots out like so. Some people, they're out there on the lake. You're just loading it up and and you keep your rod straight where you want to shoot it and let go. It'll shoot underneath. I shoot under garage doors out there. And what I do there is I skip it. Sometimes on those, I use a smaller rod because I get a little bit closer. It's a little bit more flexible. It's still got a medium, but with it, I can do more of a flinging action where it hits the door and scoops it up underneath there and skips it and shoots it back in there further. But I typically, on shooting docks, I use a 1/32 jig head, which is the smaller of them. I'm trying to get by with the least amount of weight as possible so that it floats slower, remains in the strike zone a lot faster. Sometimes you have to play with your count. Sometimes I do a 3 count, 1001, 1002, 1003, and then I start cranking in slowly. Or sometimes I go 5 count, depending on the depth of water or where the fish are. You have to play around with that. But crappie don't feed, they're not bottom feeders. Crappie, if you look in here, crappie are typically always, their eyes are on the top of their head, they're looking up. So, they're going to feed upwards, they're going to come up and grab that jig. And when you're doing that, I use a high vis line. It's hard, it's that yellow line right here.
Is that the best line you use?
For crappie fishing, yes, because you're not just feeling for a strike. Sometimes that fish has that jig, you don't even know it. Because they come up and they're just suspended there. They're just suspended just like this. They'll come up, they'll grab it, and they're just there and they're slowly moving. I watch for slack in the line, and I watch for the line to start moving. If it starts veering to the right or left, or I see it slack up, it's time to hook. Because there's a lot of fish that are missed because people they're waiting for them to feel that thump.
That part, yeah.
Yeah, we're waiting for that thump. And if you're waiting for the thump, you're going to miss a lot of fish. That's why the high vis line is important, because you watch them for the reaction of that line in the water. I mean, sometimes you'll see it go slack, sometimes you'll see it slowly drifting. I mean, I've had fish where I'm reeling it in, and they're moving sideways with me, and I don't even know they're on there. And then until I noticed it was going to the side, and then I set the hook. But I mean, it's important to pay attention to your line when you're fishing for these things under the docks, because a lot of things, you want to try, when you're fishing those things, you want to try to get as close to the poles and let it fall by a pole, because that's typically whenever I fish, I say 80% of the time, most of my fish are caught on the fall.
On the fall.
Yep.
That's when they hit the bait.
Yep.
I've had it happen too,
You know, as far as baits I like to use for dock shooting, I mean, my favorite, because they're not expensive, are these crappie magnets with these double cross hooks. And the reason I like these double cross hooks is they have 2 barbs on them. Because you're shooting all the time, that jig will want to get, the body will want to get loose on the head. So you're constantly, out of 10 casts, you're going to have to redo your body. And I have a guys that use regular, and they super glue the gorilla glue, the bodies, they gorilla glue them to it. I find with these double cross, I usually don't have a problem with the bodies coming loose. The hooks cost a little bit more, but the bodies don't come loose on it, and they stay on there. That's what I have on here. But I can sit there and yank on that thing. It takes a while for it to come off loose, but it's got the double barbs on there to keep it from coming loose. But it saves wear and tear on the body, so you get more use out of the jig. Another one that a lot of the guys in the club like to use, it's the Bobby Garland's. This is one of their favorite colors, the Outlaw. Brian Love, he swears by it. Yeah, my favorite color is black and chartreuse and the Crawford magnets. So I catch a lot of them on that. I'm told that the reason the black and chartreuse works so well is it mimics the brim color. That's why a brim minnow is they look black and chartreuse, or it mimics closest to that color. So crappie are typically really aggressive eaters.
They are.
Yeah. I mean they're probably worse than a bass when it comes to feeding on minnows and stuff. So when there's an opportunity, they're going to. I mean, I pulled brim this big out of a crappie. So they get it in their mouth, they're going to eat it. Bass are the same way. I mean, I've seen bass with bass in their mouth. So
Bass.
what?
What?
I've seen bass with bass in their mouth, about the same size.
Oh, okay.
I mean, if they can get it in their mouth, they're going to try to eat it. So, crappie are the same way as that. If they get it in their mouth, they're going to try to eat it. Before I move on from fish and docks, does anybody have any questions about dock shooting? Okay. Well, as far as line goes on dock shooting, didn't cover that. I typically like a 4-pound test. Good 4-pound test is good. That allows the line to sink freely. Not a lot of restriction on it. Helps it float, the jig float down more presentable. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is brush piles. Sometimes a brush pile is just a Christmas tree. Sometimes it's a whole tree. I have some place out there that's a whole tree that's out in the middle of a channel. Now I'm talking about the floated out in the middle of the channel, fell in and settled down. But and then there's some deadfalls. That's deadfalls. I do fish deadfalls. Those typically, if it's out in the middle of a channel, you need to have a good marker for a point of reference. You find it, you mark it. If it's big, if it's a big tree, like there's a couple places, I'll mark both ends of it so that I know which way and where I'm at, and because I can fish the whole thing without having to look at my fish finder. And that's the benefit of having that. Because I mean, some of them can cover 20 feet out there, or 10 feet, the middle, which just helps you keep a reference on what you're doing. Myself personally, I have I have the iPilot on my boat, so that whenever I find structure, I can hit anchor mode, and that iPilot anchor mode will keep me over that structure. And it's always better whenever there's a little breeze. It keeps you more accurate, because if there's already any wind out there, you tend to drift off a little bit. But if there's always a breeze, it keeps you pretty close to where you need to be at, and keeps you oriented to it. But I don't know, when you're looking at a brush pile on the down imaging, I mean, sometimes it's just, there's the trees, and you're going to see little dots. Sometimes you see them. The board dot, I look at a brush pile on my down imaging, and it shows me, I can see the branches, I can see the specks where fish and what size those specks are. I can see typically sometimes you'll see bigger specks over here to the side. But crappie, when they're on a pile, they're stacked up. I mean, it's just, you'll know it's first spot. You see it. And crappie tend to like stack up and grow. And like if you look on your depth finder, even with the 2D imaging, it will look like a bunch of arches. They stack up vertically. Crappie are one of the only fish I know that do that out there. That's how we find them. This differentiate crappie from all those other fish out there. The brambles scatter, the crappie like to be stacked. They like to stack up and make a profile. But I typically, when I work brush pile, I pay attention to the top depth. Like I'm in 20 foot of water, and it shows this top is sometimes it's I'm like 25 foot of water, and this comes up to 10 foot depth. Yeah, so I know that I got 15 foot of brush, 15 foot tree. I try to work the top of that tree, and then I try to find the edges, and I try to work the sides of it. That keeps you from losing that bait. Sometimes I'll rig up weedless. And what I mean by weedless, I don't really have a bait here. Probably make this, but I'll take it and just rig up that, and I'll just bring that tip of that hook right into the back of it, so that when a fish hits it, it pulls it on through like a Texas rig on a worm, and that way you can drop it down into that pile and work inside the pile, and you catch more fish that way. because you're able to get down in the branches, it doesn't get the it doesn't snag up as much. But the deeper the water, the heavier jig I usually use to get the jig down there. So if it's 30, 40 foot of water, I use a 1/8. You know, if I'm in 20 foot of water, I'll typically try to use the 1/16. The shallower the water, the lighter jig I like to use. The least amount of weight you can get by with using those things is better, because it keeps it in the strike zone a lot longer. But just to get it down deep, you've got to have a heavier jig. As far as deadfalls, it's another type of burst pile, basically. You know, it's where the tree falls in the water, it's on shore. Around springtime, spawning, there's a lot of, those trees hold a lot of fish. But typically what I'll do on those is, you know, I'll use a bobber fish in the edges, or I'll actually get in the pile with my longer rods, and I'll actually take, I have different length rods, but I can take this jig and I can drop it down in that tree in spots and just work that spot. I catch a lot of fish that way. And those crappie, they're up in the tree. They're not just on the edges. And some of the bigger fish I find are in the middle. But I'll take and just drop that down through the branches. I'll use live minnows.
You don't get hung up in nothing.
Oh, you get hung up sometimes, but typically more I try to find, you know how when a tree falls, there's big branches, there's spaces. When I work in those spaces, I'm not actually working the tips of the brush part. I'm working the thicker part of the trees towards the center. Yeah, because the thicker parts are out towards the edges of the branches, whereas the trunk of the tree, I'm trying to work the trunk of the tree. That's what I'm doing. And with a long pole, it allows you to, I mean, some people use cane poles. They don't even use a fishing rod reel. They'll use just cane poles. You know, just something long enough to get you in there. Because you don't need to worry about reeling because you got the length. You know, it's like this rod's 10 foot long. So I know that I'm 10 foot right here. So if I drop in there, when I drop down, I know how far I'm dropping that thing, depth-wise. You know, it's just, you just got to be able to pull it up out of there and get the fish out. But, you know, I have rods that are 18 foot long that I use sometimes. So that really allows me to get back in there. But there are also rods I use for spider rigging and other type of fishing I do, but that was another class. So I'm not going to touch too much on that. But unless somebody wants to talk about that afterwards, I think I'll talk about that. But the main thing is just getting in there where the fish live and working them out of there. So, and staying, you know, like I said, you don't have to go too far in there because they do feed up and they will come up to your bait. They can see it, they're going to come up to it. You don't need to drop it all the way to the bottom. That's where you get in trouble, the snags. Does anybody have any questions about, well, the other thing I do as far as structure goes, I mean, I drop off, bluffs, rocks.
Yeah, tell me about the bluff.
Bluffs, you're going to look for inlets, outcrops, things that will hold fish. You know, you need to pay attention to your thermocline. You know, you'll see it on your graph. You'll see where the fish are. If you look at your fish finder, you'll see that most fish that I catch are probably not any deeper than 15 feet. I catch them 15 foot to a couple feet. know, the only time I really have to go deeper is in the summertime, in July, August, when the water temperature's up. Then I'll go down to 45 feet. And they just like that cooler water, because that colder water holds more oxygen. So the warmer the water, the less oxygen that's in the water. So fish will typically follow where they can breathe better, where they're more comfortable. But you know, I just look for on my, like I said, you'll see them. You'll see them on the bluffs like this. That means if you look on your fish finder, they're still stacked up like this. They still stack up.
Even on the bluff.
Yeah, crappie are not loner fish usually. They like to be in schools. And when they school up, they look like that.
Do they school by size?
You tend to catch a lot of same size fish, but sometimes there's a bigger fish in with schools. I mean, but typically they're, you know, if you see one dock, it will have all the same size fish on it. But there might be one big one in there.
I was fishing one time with the dock. There was, when the boat slipped, there was open.
Yeah.
So I cast in there.
Right.
And then I usually count to about 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah.
And let it fall down.
Right.
And then start working.
Yeah.
But I caught about 15 fish and wasn't none of them keeping.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. Sometimes you'll get a dock that has a bunch of small, I call them dinks. You know, below 10 fish.
9.5 inches.
Right. Right.
10 limit.
Right. Right. And and usually when I run in a dock like that, I will typically move on to another dock. Because there are docks that tend to hold small fish, and there's docks that tend to hold big fish.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's like you'll catch a big fish off of it, and another one will move in.
What is the best time to troll fish?
Trolling? Typically, are you talking about like spider rigging where you're pushing the jigs, or are you talking about pulling crankbaits
No, what we do,
or pulling jigs?
we cast and start working the jig, and one guy's on the trolling mode.
Right, you're talking about long line.
Yeah, long. We
Long
cast
line.
and then reel in, cast and reel in. We did pretty
Typically,
good like
anytime they're in the channels and transition, it's a good time. They're like right now. They're in the channels right now. They're in the creek channels, and they're in the river channel or ditches. They're in places where you're going from 10 foot of water down to 30 foot of water. They're on that transition. In there, they're just that's where they're at right now. That's where I've been finding them. So when I was out on Thursday, one guy, I talked to some people. I was up Sail Creek area. And this guy's like, "Well, how you doing?" I said, "Well, I could see him." The guy drove right over him, and I was sitting there, and I just caught a bunch of white crappie right there where he was at, and he drove right over him. All I was doing was using my trolling motor and just jigging. So, but it was around a bunch of deadfall trees too. But the water depth was 25 feet right there. So, but they were stacked up in there, 25 feet. But they were down, and the water depth was 25, and they were probably around 20 feet themselves. So, but I caught some. So I caught a lot of fish on there. I had a good time. Any other questions about fishing brush piles? Another kind of fishing. Other thing too is fishing brush piles with minnows and stuff. You should use a line counter so you know how far you're dropping. So you know that brush pile's the top of it's at 15 feet. You can drop that thing down to 15 feet. You don't have to worry about getting snagged up at the top of that tree. So another type fishing that's coming up here that fixing to be good is in the springtime, crappie move up into the shallows.
Yeah, they do.
They like the stump fields that we have out there in the lake. Chickamauga has a lot of stump fields. But I mean, I've caught them in 1 foot of water in the spring, And typically what I do for that is I do a float and fly fishing. That's what it's called. Typically I use a bobber about that size. This one has rattles in it that will attract the fish. They come to noise sometimes. It mimics minnows in a feeding fish in a feeding frenzy.
You use minnows to stick the artificial bait.
What?
You use minnows with artificial bait.
On the float and fly, I typically use artificial because they are so aggressive. I do use minnows, but float and fly, I got this a little high right now. But typically, that's the depth I'm at. And I'm fishing. If I'm doing, I like to use a lighter jig. That takes probably not even. That's not even 1/32. That's lighter than that. But the reason I use that lighter one back there is so that it falls through the water a lot slower, especially whenever I'm going. If I'm casting 1 foot of water, I want that in that 1 foot. I want it to sink as slow as possible, so that fish has more time to see it and grab it. But typically, I'll cast that out, and a windier day is better, but I'll cast it to the shore, work it out. I'll cast it through, if I'm in a stump field, I'm casting it through the stumps, and I'm just reeling in slow. If it's a windy day or a light breeze and there's a little bounce on the water, that's perfect. Or just slow reeling that in, and it just drives me crazy. I did some on Thursday. I did a little float fly. I caught a bunch of brim.
Are you going to fill a strike with that rig?
What?
Are you going to fill a
No,
strike?
you're watching for the bobber. You're watching for the bobber. You'll watch that bobber. You'll see it. It goes really. But typically, if it's not windy, you'll have to give it a little snapping action. Again, I use a medium action rod with a fast tip. You tend to feel more strikes with that kind of rig. So, but that's